Hello everyone, it's Rachel with Things We Wear, and today, as promised, I'm going to do a video about what marker efficiency is and why it's important if you're interested in shopping sustainably, if you're interested in going low waste or zero waste, or if you're interested in pattern making and how clothes are made. This field actually extends to a lot of different areas, but it's kind of, I don't know that I would say it's overly complicated, but I think sometimes when you look at a marker, I can see people's eyes glaze over. So I'll try to make this as simple to understand, but helpful for all of you out there, whether you're just someone who wants to know more about clothing, or if you're a home sewer, or if you're learning to be a pattern maker, or even already in the industry. It's a great concept to know because not only is it eco-friendly and low waste, it's also really good for your budget. So if you're trying to make things on a budget and make the best use of your fabric, being aware of marker efficiency is the way to do that. So this all started because of Hannah Anderson. And give me one second. Okay. Back. So this started because of Hannah Anderson. My sister sent me this link. She's a huge fan of Hannah Anderson, as are a lot of people. Really cute, fun stuff. And I love that their clothing it's like kind of gender open, and it's not super like flowers for girls, trucks for boys. Like, it's just here's a bunch of cool prints and pick what you want, and it's all fun and bright colors. So I do really like it from a personal expression, open-mindedness kind of standpoint. So they recently came out with this set of pajamas. This is all they have so far. It's called the Remix Short. I thought that they called them upcycled. Yep, see, it's called upcycled here, upcycled material. So, but I guess the technical title that they're using is remixed. And so what that means is, rather than having a garment where it's all this print, this flower print, we have the stripes on the sleeves and the flower on the body, and then one leg is the stripe. And you can see for all of these, they have the same arrangement of fabric. And let's see what they say. They're using upcycled material that would otherwise go to waste. We created these fun remixed pajamas. Okay. So they're not saying specifically. What I would be interested in is, and what I think would actually be a better use of fabric, but I don't know if people would be into this, is right now they're saying that, or they're not saying that it's not true, but I would assume as a consumer that they're not telling me anything different than, if I bought this, I'm going to get a shirt with 2 striped sleeves, and the right leg is going to have stripes and the left leg is going to have watermelons. That is one way to do this, but specifying that is actually not being as efficient. The most efficient way is to use your fabric as best you can, which might mean that one of the sleeves is going to have watermelon and one not. And it might mean that both legs have watermelons. It really depends on what you can get out of the fabric at any given time. So truly efficient marker usage might not look so neat and consistent. It might have more variation between products. I actually think that'd be cool. I think it's nice to have product that's different each one, and if you go in store, that gives you another reason to want to pick it out, because you're like, oh cool, look at this one. It has watermelon on the sleeve and the body, but then stripes everywhere else. It just feels like a little more fun to have that uniqueness when it comes to our clothing, since most of us buy clothing. We don't mostly make our own clothing, so for the most part we're wearing commercial clothing, which means that having a sense of personal style is reliant on you, on how you pick it and how you wear it, and style it, whatever. But there's not, at the base level, it's all the same, right? So that would be kind of a cool idea. There is another brand that's known for doing this that I didn't talk about in my little YouTube short, and I'm going to bring them up right now. Let's see here. They're called Cotopaxi. I'm sure there's other brands that do the, oops, I spelled it with a K, that do this, but I don't know. I'm not going to say I'm an expert on all of them. So Cotopaxi is known for using what's called dead stock fabric. So that means that it's fabric. They basically buy fabric from other brands or maybe mills. I'm not exactly sure where they get all their fabric, but it's fabric that, let's say, other brands contracted with a mill. Hey, we want this many yards of this fabric for this this order. And then sometimes things happen, like COVID happens and the fabric didn't get used, or maybe the units that they needed changed, or for whatever reason, maybe the mill made an extra roll to test. So Cotopaxi uses that dead stock fabric and turns it into things like bags and garments. I don't know how consistent their coloring is. So let's look at something like this. So you can see everything they do is like multicolored, and that I believe is why. I actually love it. I think it's so super fun. And let's see here. This one-of-a-kind pack. Okay, cool. So that is consistent with what I'm saying. So here we go. So here's the, here are the bags, and it says like, either you can choose a colorway, and there's all these different colorways, like, because they've just used whatever fabric they have available. There's a lot of different colorways. So you can pick one, and it's telling you in the moment, if you buy this, it's one of a kind. So, so you're getting this bag, and if you don't buy it now, it might not be here. That's kind of neat. And then if you don't want to pick, you can just say, surprise me, and then let them send you whatever color it is. Ooh, I love this. I am a super fan of bright colors. Let's see if it says anything. Originally designed. Each bag is made with remnant materials by employees who decide exactly how each one looks. So that's pretty cool. So it gives the power to the people making it to just say, hey, this looks cute. And in other words, no two are exactly alike. Oh, interesting. So this is another thing. We've updated our pricing for the labor involved in allowing you to choose your own bag. So if you chose Surprise Me, it's actually a lower price. So let me explain why that makes sense. Is because, let's see the difference here. Surprise Me is $60, and I'll choose is $65. So you're paying $5 more to choose. And here's the reason, is because if you're clicking Surprise Me, they don't have to take a photo of every single bag. But if you're saying, I'll choose, now you're specifying which bag. So not only do they have to, take these photos, upload it to the website, clean them up, make the lighting good. Like, the expense of taking a photo for a website is actually quite high. And the number of people, because you need a photo shoot, you need a photographer, you need lighting equipment, you need someone to upload it to the website and touch it up. So that's not cheap. So you're paying for that. And then you're also paying for the amount of organization that goes into keeping that one style in a place that someone can find it and send it to you. So if you went with Surprise Me, they could just have a whole bin of these backpacks and someone could just pick one and you could have it. But if you go with I'll choose, now you're wanting a very specific backpack, and that takes more time and effort on the part of their warehouse employees to pick that one bag and then send it out to you. So actually, I think a $5 upcharge is almost, I don't know that covers the difference in cost. My guess is that they're saying that this is one of a kind, but my guess is that it's actually, there's quite a few that are exactly like this, because that's the only way that only a $5 upcharge could make sense in my mind. I'm not sure, but either that or they're getting enough of an upcharge on this bag period that it makes up the expense, but the difference to me is not big enough. Yeah. But anyway, so super cool, and I'm just going to read a little bit about them, about us, and I can tell you Gear for Good, our story. I don't want to listen. Okay, it's not really saying a lot about their dead stock. Our goal is to use repurposed, recycled, or otherwise responsible materials by 2025. But to be honest, I feel like in my knowledge, they've done this along the way a lot of the times. So let's just look and see what a lot of their stuff looks like and see if... Okay, so yeah, so here I would bet that this isn't quite as much dead stock fabric. Yeah, and they're not saying that it is. So it does have that same look to it where it's like color blocks and colorful and interesting, but they're not saying that it's dead stock fabric, which probably means that it isn't, which means that, they're not getting super marker efficient products here in fact, they might be getting less marker efficient because they have so many specific colors. So let me explain what a marker is, and then we can get more into that. All right, let me pull down my pattern making program. Okay, so actually I started Googling and then I figured I would show you guys what I found. So I'm on this website called Smart Pattern Making. I don't know what this website is, but they are explaining what I wanted to explain in a way that's, I think different programs are going to show this differently, so it's helpful to see it in this way. This looks like AccuMark to me, if you use AccuMark, the pattern making program, and this is their marker making program. So for most programs, you'll have a pattern making program, and then you'll have a separate marker making program. I don't really understand why those are two separate programs and why they wouldn't be combined. I think it's sort of an antiquated thing because pattern makers and marker makers are traditionally separate jobs, but increasingly I don't know that that makes sense because it's a digital process. I go back and forth because production marker making is actually pretty complex because you need to think about the number of plies of fabric you're cutting, the number of garments that you need to create. So you might have, let's say, 23 extra smalls and 200 smalls and 800 mediums, and you're trying to get them all done within one marker, right? So let me explain. So a marker is basically, it's when you take all the pattern pieces, and here this looks like what is this? I was going to say pants, but then a top? I don't know what this is. Maybe it's a jumpsuit. It might be like a traditional kind of like Western t-shirt, but I feel like I'm missing the yoke in the back. Anyway, so these are all the pieces. One colorway is one size. So let's say this colorway is extra small, this is small, this is medium, this is large. So this marker maker has arranged all of these pieces on this marker, and the marker is basically it's like a template for how you're going to cut out all of your pieces. So if you're a home sewer, you've seen this before. When you use a home sew pattern, they'll often give you several different arrangements of the pieces depending on the width of your fabric. Although if you're anything like me, you just do whatever you want anyway. So I don't usually follow the pre-described markers. I usually kind of cut out my pieces and figure out how to get them on there in my own way. I don't know why, but yeah, that's what that is. So markers are really a way of trying to maximize the space within your marker. When you have more pieces, so you'll see this pattern has a lot of pieces. Let's say each garment is this is quite a few little pieces here. It does become more efficient. So efficiency is out of 100%, right? 100% is using all of your fabric. As you have more space between pattern pieces, see here, this black space here, that's all waste. So once you cut these pieces, those spaces get thrown away. For a lot of different fabric types, there's not a lot we can do to recycle the fabric. Some people are trying to get creative with fabric recycling and use it in insulation in houses or things like that. I don't know that we've really come to a good place with what to do with excess fabric. Using it as house insulation isn't really a great use of that fabric. We have insulation that works really well, and that's the best thing for homes is to use the material that is most insulating, because then it's most efficient when it comes to energy usage, right? So there's so many different things you have to think about. I think the best use for a marker is just to reduce waste. To try to think about how to recycle the fabric isn't really a good way to deal with it, and we don't really have a good use for it at this time, depending on the fabric. Some fabrics, if they're 100% fibers or something, we can use them. But yeah, for the most part, let's kind of disregard fabric recycling because it is sort of a weird and tricky area. So this person made this marker, and then once you place all your pieces, in AccuMark it's giving you this, I don't know what the CU stands for, cutting, utility, utilize, I'm not sure. But basically this percentage, this is an 82.88%. I would say that's actually pretty high. So you can see there's not a lot of black space on this marker, and that's a good thing. and it's still wasting 17-ish% of the fabric. So that's pretty high. When you think about buying a new garment, this is another reason people talk about buying secondhand clothing as being a more efficient way to shop, because if you buy a new garment, you're inherently buying those spaces in between that got thrown away. So already by buying the garment, you've thrown away 17% of the fabric that was used to make your garment. So it is a pretty important thing to think about. There's a lot of waste that comes in here. And this, I would say, is this is a pretty efficient style. For a lot of markers, you are not getting anywhere close to this efficient of a marker percentage. And of course, this is all dependent on sizing. So if you have smaller sizes, usually you can get more efficiency out of it. And that's probably why Cotopaxi and why Hannah Anderson, they're doing smaller things. So Cotopaxi is doing the bag that has all those small pieces. It's a great use of little bits of fabric. And Hannah Anderson is doing kids' pajamas. They're not doing adult pajamas, they're doing kids' pajamas, which are small little pieces again. So those are really great usage for those little bits of fabric in between things that you couldn't get an adult size pant in. Smaller sizes are more efficient. As you go larger in sizes, you have larger pieces, which means you have larger gaps, and sometimes it's harder to fill all of those gaps. A good way to fill all of those gaps is to bring in a different style and utilize that fabric as needed. So for instance, let's say I was cutting this shirt and I have all these little gaps, and I'm like, what do I do with this extra fabric? Well, I could say, I'm going to use this space and cut little straight pieces of fabric and weave a rug out of them, for instance. So with all these little straight pieces, I could weave like a rug that might be all the same color or mix match, depending on the different colorways of your garment. And that's a great use of that excess fabric. So you need to find something that has small little pieces that you can bring together to create something that people actually want and will use. And often it's like accessories, or sometimes people will take the excess and felt it together. That's a common one. So these are the kinds of things people start to think about when they think about marker efficiency. All right, let me show you something else. I have heard of some marker efficient patterns. Let's see here. Well, I will show you this. This is a t-shirt, and I do feel that there was, at some point, there was an artist. I went and saw his presentation, and he was really obsessed with using every piece of fabric. I'm not sure how to find him. I'll have to keep looking. But basically it meant that he had a very boxy garment. There were no curves, which meant that he could basically use every piece. Marker efficient clothing. Maybe this will show us. I don't see it. Okay, but let me show you that t-shirt, because I do think this will illustrate what I'm saying a little bit better. Okay. This is Fashion Incubator, which, if you don't know the website, is super helpful. So this doesn't look like AccuMark to me. I don't know what program this is, or maybe it's a really old one. You can see that there's a lot more dead space. So this is like, it looks like a top. Here's the sleeve. It has a front closure and a facing. So these little facings sometimes can help marker efficiency. Sometimes they don't, because they're kind of awkward, especially anything with a curve can be very awkward as well, because we're trying to fit curved items onto a rectangular piece of fabric. Very difficult to do that. You can see the marker maker here actually mixed sizes all around. This is a good way to increase your marker efficiency, but sometimes that's kind of confusing. Once you cut it, then now you have to make sure all the sizes are correctly together, and that in sewing they don't get confused and accidentally sew the size large back to the size small front. So different people have different manufacturers may have strong feelings about how you organize your production markers. So not everyone would do something like this and mix all the sizes. This is pretty all over the map, but you are getting a better marker efficiency here. I don't see that. I don't see that there's an efficiency yield here. Here we go. I think this is here, 61 point. So this is when you organize by size. You can see the difference here. It's only 61% efficient. That is that is super low. When you think about that almost half, or okay, we'll call it 40%. So 40% of the fabric is thrown away with every t-shirt, or this isn't a t-shirt, it's like maybe a short jacket. Every short jacket that you own, 50% or 40% of the fabric is just thrown away right off the bat. And here she's actually going quite in depth about marker efficiency, so I will have to read this, and I will leave a link to this down below if you would like to check it out. Yeah, I think this is a great resource, and a lot of people really love Fashion Incubator for her information. I know that there was a woman I was talking to recently who was a big fan of hers. All right, so let's talk about this t-shirt. So now that we've seen that marker, if you are just a home sewer, or you're, let's say you're a home sewer and you have one single pattern, this is something that you can think about. I'm gonna show my other half, open half. So this is my Tuca design program, and Tuca Tech is one of the pattern making programs. I don't have a specific marker making program. As a pattern maker, I'm not making production marker makers. When I do export something, I just export it as a PDF, and then I can rearrange the pieces in Illustrator. But yeah, basically, no matter how I arrange it, if I'm to cut one piece, I'm gonna have some wastage here, because let's say I could get them all, if my fabric is pretty wide, I get them all this way. There's inherently some space that I'm not going to use for a single garment. Now, if I had two garments, it doesn't really help, because I'd still have this gap of fabric with the sleeve. So the best use, if you are a home sewer and you want to increase your usage of fabric, first off, I would say save your wastage. And second off, I would say get into crazy quilting, because there is some really cool stuff out there. Let me show you some things I found. Okay, so this is something that I have been planning to start doing. I have a ton of little scraps of fabric that I've been trying to figure out what to do with. It's been like my ongoing personal struggle. And I have too many projects that I have started simultaneously. I'm sure most of you out there can relate. But if you Google crazy quilt modern, or if you just look at crazy quilts, I actually think crazy quilts are quite lovely. And really, the idea of a crazy quilt traditionally is because they're using the excess fabric. So crazy quilts began because it's like the leftover pieces of little bits of garments that people made at home, and then they started making them into quilts. And it became quite an art. I mean, I think they can be really, really amazing. It kind of became a thing in its own. So then you got all of these interesting fabrications, from velvet and satin to calicos. And what's fun about crazy quilts too is you can kind of go wild with it. You can do embroidery, you can add patches on it. And I think sometimes some people can interpret them as a bit gaudy or a bit much, but that's why I like the idea of a modern crazy quilt, because you can still think about it in terms of a color tone. So when you have excess fabric, just sort of save it by color story or color family, cool tones, warm tones, or if you want to do like pastels or something bright colors. And having a quilt pattern like this one, where it's a bunch of small pieces, that's a great way to use the little pieces. And it is a little bit more relaxed looking. A more traditional crazy quilt might not have that sort of geometric symmetry. See, in this crazy quilt, it's basically like whatever pieces there are, they fit them in. And in this one, it's much more structured. I would imagine someone making this might even have bought fabric for this quilt. It's not what I would recommend. I think if you want to use up your scrap fabric, then I would go kind of in the more, I would go with what shapes you have. So let's see. Yeah, a lot of these are using patterns instead of just random shapes. But I think you kind of get it. This is a great use of it. You can also use make like a scrap rug. This is a great example. Obviously, this is one made by a rug company, but you can get a home loom and do your own home rugs, which are really beautiful. I used to work with someone who would take the scraps from our fabric and make all sorts of cool things, chair covers and rugs. She was really brilliant with it. There is so much that you can do. Oh, that's really cool. There is so much you can do with your leftover fabric, even as simple as little squares. And then, so if you have a lot of variety, the way that you can tie things together is either with a color story, by grouping things by color family, or arranging them in color order, so you go from pastel to dark or something like that, or create repetition in shapes. So if you look at this quilt, and this is a new quilt, so this isn't really exactly a crazy quilt, but you can see there's a wide variety of fabrications here. But what holds them all together is that basically every other square is pastel, sort of like, or it's a high number of pastels, which are sort of like maybe a more neutral tone. And then you have a few bright squares, but they're never next to each other. And everything is married by the fact that it's all the same size square. It looks to be about 3 or 4, yeah, let's say it's like 3.5 inches wide, 3 by 3 or 3.5 by 3.5. So that helps keep it all even looking and very lovely. So if you have scrap fabric, that's a great use for it. I did want to come back to what she said on the fabric incubator, because I did think this was an interesting point. So for this, there's 2 ways that you can make markers in production, and I know this is a little bit complicated, but when you're in production, let's say you're a small brand and you are making a t-shirt, or let's say you're making this jacket. So you have extra small through extra large, and usually when you are making garments, the highest number of garments that you'll make are in the middle sizes. So you'll make the most number of smalls. Let's say you might have like 700 smalls and 700 mediums, and you might have 300 extra smalls and 300 larges and 200 extra larges. So that's typically how the breakdown goes. The most commonly sold sizes usually are the middle size, but of course it depends on your customer, it depends on how you market it. So that's very general speaking here. There's no rule of thumb necessarily to how size breakdown works, but that's typical. So you have all those different sizes and you know you need different units in them. So now you're trying to cut it. You're trying to cut that order, and you have 40 plies of fabric, and you're trying to get the right number of garments on that 40 plies. So that's where it gets a little tricky, because you want to be marker efficient like this one. And if you mix up your sizes like this one, you will have more marker efficiency, but this marker will only work once. So you'll only get to use this. Someone will have to spend a lot of time calculating, all right, so it's 40 plies deep, so we only need to place 2 of the extra larges because we only need 80 of them, but we need 10 of the smalls because we want 400 of them. So that's how they're calculating this kind of production marker. And what that means is, right, it's only going to work for that exact number of plies and that exact number of units in that size breakdown that you are asking for. So this takes time to generate. There are some programs that auto-generate it, and then you usually want a person to go back in there and make sure everything looks good and that there's no errors. But yeah, so this would help do that. The programs that do it are quite expensive, I would say. The other option, of course, is doing something like this. So you could have a marker made where it's each divided by size. Here's extra large, large, medium, small, extra small. The problem is you're going to have way more wastage here, as you can see. But the benefit is that you could use this marker again and again. So if you know, hey, you can basically just like break these out into small rectangles and say, all right, I need 60 smalls, and then you sold out of 60 smalls, so you can just cut another 60 smalls, and you don't have to hire a marker maker or have an expensive program to make a new marker for this new order. You can just cut to each of your orders. But again, really inefficient. You're going to be wasting a ton of fabric that way. I think for the amount of money that you will save, fabric isn't cheap. And if you're making garments in a good way, you should be using high quality fabric. For the amount of waste that happens by using a marker that is this inefficient, it's worth paying someone who, or if you do a lot of business, maybe getting the software, but it's probably worth paying someone to do a marker that looks like this, that's going to give you that really efficient marker for exactly the cut that you're wanting to do, because in the end, you're going to save a lot of money in fabric. So I hope that kind of makes sense. I know that's a little bit complicated. If you're not used to looking at markers, it can be a little bit overwhelming. I personally remember the first time I saw a marker, I was like, oh gosh, what is this? So many lines. But it's really not so complicated. It's pretty simple math. You just have to think it through. So I hope this video helps explain marker usage a little bit better to you guys. I know it's quite a concept to try to explain in a short video, but I will go into more depth, and maybe I will explore. I don't really even know what Tuka Tech has as far as marker making, but I can explore that if any of you are interested in that. As a pattern maker, I usually just do the pattern, and if I do a marker, it's only for sample making. I don't do production markers. So usually those are different people who do that job. But I'd be happy to explore it if any of you are interested. And I do know a bit about it because I have worked in production, it's particularly USA production. So I've been definitely knee-deep in production markers before. So I'm happy to go into more detail if any of you are interested. All right, so I will leave it there for today, and I will pick back up with my next video on the t-shirt pattern making project I've been working on. So I hope that you will join me for that coming up. And if you have any questions, you can leave me a comment below. You can send me an email, thingswewear@gmail.com without the I. And I'd be happy to answer them for you. And of course, I'd be happy to work with you. So if you'd like to book time with me, you can go to my website. You can book a free phone call. We can chat about what you'd like to work on together. And I also have slots where you can book time to work with me on a style or help with anything that you're looking for help with. I would be more than happy to help you out. All right, I hope you all are enjoying a good week, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.